Hey team, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk a bit about those magical electional opportunities that we are going to have, get my paper here, between our Gemini Full Moon on November 26th and our Sagittarius New Moon on December 13th. So these past few lunations have been really difficult when it comes to magical elections, and we're still not really out of it yet. I'm about 2 more bad days away from just turning the channel over to Cinnamon and seeing what he can do with it, because it's just running out of stuff to talk about sometimes. But for now, we do have a couple of electional opportunities to discuss, which is really great, because like I said, we've kind of gone through a period where there hasn't been a whole lot. So unfortunately, these opportunities that we have aren't what I would call like super awesome or maybe even all that applicable. We are in a waning moon phase, so we do kind of have to lean into that energy of diminishing and letting go. But we do have a couple of opportunities to help us tap into that if that's something that you're interested in, or kind of a phase of your life that you're going through right now. So our first electional opportunity is going to be for the 14th Lunar Mansion, Al-Simak. And the 14th Lunar Mansion is very much into that like separating, letting go, breaking apart kind of energy. A lot of times I prefer working with the 12th Lunar Mansion, Al-Sarfa, who in my opinion is gentler in a lot of ways when it comes to this kind of like breaking up force, because it is in many ways a kind of a violent force where we are forced to, I guess, take a shot every time I say the word force. Where we have to kind of apply this negative energy towards something to... So Al-Samak is very much in tune with this breaking apart, dissolution, being by oneself. That's really kind of the modus operandi of Al-Samak. So I'd often recommend this talisman to people who need help letting go of something, who need help breaking something apart, who need help separating themselves from something. Obviously, we would want this to be something that them being a part of is no good for them. Usually something like a bad habit, maybe a bad relationship, a job that they're struggling to kind of let go of, or somebody that they're struggling to cut off from their life. All these can be really great applications for Al-Samak, breaking bad habits, things like that. This is normally something that I recommend Al-Sarfa for, the 12th Lunar Mansion, just because I feel like Al-Sarfa has a much gentler touch when it comes to helping us break through things or let go of things or move past things, whereas Al-Samak is a bit more forceful. And that can be fine, especially for instances that require that kind of direct force, but Al-Sarfa is a little bit more gentle in how it approaches it. So that would be sort of my caveat. If you are in a situation where maybe a bit more finesse is needed, for whatever reason, then maybe wait until we get an Al-Sarfa talisman. But if that's not really something you care about, and if like burning things down as you leave is definitely something that you are okay with doing, something that you want to give a shot, then Al-Samak can definitely help you to do that. So taking a look at our elections, the North American version of this will take place on December 6th at 1:11 in the morning. And so here you can see the moon in the 14th Lunar Mansion. And at this time, she is applying this square to Mercury that she will complete, of course, after she switches signs into Libra. Mercury is going to rule our first house here from Capricorn, and Mercury's doing fine, not square Saturn, not square Mars or anything like that, far enough away from the sun to not have to worry about combustion. And normally, squares tend to be a little bit tense. But that's the kind of a tension that we can absolutely use when we're wanting to like break apart or move beyond something or dissolve something. That's the kind of energy that we typically want to move into. And this is something that I've talked about a lot when it comes to these talismans that are more focused on breaking things apart, is that the application that the moon makes is really important. The application that the moon makes is always important, but especially when it comes to something like this that tends to be more destructive oriented, because that can really change how this manifests or how this comes out, where you can have the moon apply something more benefic and make the transition much easier. It's like Cinnamon back there, scratching on my chair, just living his little cinnamon life. Cinnamon, what are you doing? So easier contacts with more benefic planets tend to make the separation easier, but tend to draw it out, whereas harsher aspects with more malefic planets tend to make the separation much more sudden, but can be a bit more difficult. And it all just comes down to like what exactly you want for your situation, what's right for you, what you're more able to handle, because there are some situations that we just want to be over now and be done with it. even if we have to kind of go through a bit of like a dramatic scene to get there. And other times it's fine just to kind of like wean ourselves off of it. So that would be the advice that I would impart for anybody who's thinking about maybe giving this talisman a go. Is if this square to Mercury is something that you feel like is, I'm going to say the word like energetically compatible to your own method of like conflict engagement or like things like that. And that is completely up to you. The other charts are going to look very similar to this. The 14th Lunar Mansion opportunity for Western Europe is going to be December 6th at basically that same time, 1:11 a.m. Here, it's like basically the exact same thing with the moon and the mansion on the ascendant. Still applying that square to Mercury. Now it's a little bit further out, but we saw that connection there. And I was really hoping that we would get a little bit more with this, just because at this time the moon is applying to the conjunction of the fixed star Alkaid, and that could have been really interesting to have an Alkaid talisman with this, but I don't think that's something I would recommend with the Mercury square. Alkaid is of the nature of the moon and Venus, so the moon applying connection to Venus would always be preferred, but the moon can carry that energy of the talisman for Alkaid by herself. But we would still kind of want that connection to like a compatible planet to make it something that's really worth using. And I'm just not sure like the square of Mercury is something that we would write home about in like an Alkaid talisman context. And then finally, the 14th Lunar Mansion for Australia is going to take place on December 7th at 1:13 in the morning. And like I said, it's very, very similar. Moon on the ascendant in the mansion, applying the square to Mercury. There is an alternate version for Australia, if you prefer. That takes place at 2016, so 8 o'clock in the at night. Let me find it. At about 2016. And this is going to be, similar. We're going to have the moon now in the third house in the lunar mansion. Mercury still rules the ascendant, this time from the 7th, and we still have that square aspect to it. So it really just comes down to which one you prefer, or maybe which one you're able to make, whether you want to, do the talisman at 8 o'clock with the moon in the third, or if you can be up at like 1:15 to do the election with the moon on the ascendant. That's up to you. They're going to be very similarly structured. Mercury's going to rule the first house no matter which one. It's just going to be Mercury in the 7th versus Mercury in the 4th. Mercury in the 7th might be a good one for if you're trying to move past a relationship or like let go of another person. So that might be one way to kind of like decide which election you want, making it a bit more specific to your situation. So our second and our final electional opportunity, because we don't have a whole lot to choose from this time, is going to be for the 15th Lunar Mansion. And the 15th Lunar Mansion is one that is a little bit more associated with the waxing moon phase. It has a bit more power to it in the waxing moon phase, where we go to it primarily for like reputation management, success in business, and of course like success in finances that often comes from success in business. Yeah. And so that's more waxing moon, 15th Lunar Mansion. The waning moon, 15th Lunar Mansion, is more focused on the suppression of rumors. And this can be really helpful for anybody who just doesn't want to be involved in other people's business or doesn't want other people involved in their business. It's just sort of like helping to kind of skirt around office gossip, or, just kind of like keeping people's noses out of your business. It can be very helpful, be a very helpful talisman to keep a hold of. And so we kind of see how these things are related, how like with the reputation management that we would normally go to with the waxing moon phase just sort of gets like slightly transformed into a more like suppressive, more like we're going to keep this quiet. So in a more like nefarious, underhanded situation, this could absolutely be used as a way to like keep information back about yourself, to keep information hidden, or to like cover up information if we wanted to go that route. But typically I think of it more in like the protective sphere, where we are utilizing this mansion to protect ourselves from like malicious rumors or things like that. I often wonder if the 15th Lunar Mansion could also work to like ward off curses or things like that, just because of like the idea of like malediction or bad speaking being like literally cursing people. And that as kind of like a form of like rumor in a way, but that's just kind of me like spitballing ideas, or just sort of like there's a word here. That's just sort of me like thinking or like riffing off of the theme of the Lunar Mansion. I've never had an experience with it as like a curse breaker or like a magic deflector talisman, and I'm not sure there would be much in there to justify that other than that sort of like unique spin on it. But the 15th Lunar Mansion talisman is something that's only going to be available for Western Europe, North Africa, and Australia. It's not something that North American is going to get. So let's take a look at it. So the 15th Lunar Mansion talisman for Western Europe and Northern Africa takes place on December 7th at around 2 in the morning. So we're kind of having very similar chart elements to the 14th Lunar Mansion talisman. It takes place just a little bit later, just a day and an hour later. So we have like basically the same chart structure with the moon on the ascendant in the 15th mansion and still applying that square to Mercury, which is now very, very tight. And I actually really enjoy the moon square Mercury here, just because I think it's kind of like a fun sort of symbol of like crushing speech and like keeping things, quiet. Mercury's in the 4th house, so it's like, let's just bury this stuff here. And it's just a great way to kind of like keep things quiet. I also really enjoy Venus as the ruler of the 1st house in Scorpio, and I know that that's like, oh, it's her detriment. But like Scorpio itself is kind of like a very closed off, quiet sign, which can be very helpful energy to bring into a talisman that's more about like keeping things closed off, kind of keeping yourself out of situations or keeping people like out of your business, that kind of thing. The reason why this is not an option for North America is, as you can see, the moon contact between the Mercury square here is very close. We're like within a little bit more than a degree away. And so by the time we would have this similar situation with the moon on the ascendant in the North American version, the moon would be past this and applying the sextile to Mars, who's combust the sun. And I don't like that energy as much. If there is something that can be said, I think, about utilizing a combust planet for keeping things hidden, like keeping people out of, keeping yourself out of harm's way or keeping yourself out of other people's business or keeping people out of your business, things like that. Just because the combustion is a little bit more secretive. It's like, it's hidden away, right? Like literally hidden, that planet is. So I would have liked this a little bit more if Mars was the ruler of the 1st house, I think. And I know I generally have a rule about the ruler of the 1st house not being combust. But I think that would make more sense because there are examples in the text of moon talismans that are made with like during the new moon phase for invisibility, which is like just, it's not like the invisibility cloak from Harry Potter, but just sort of the idea of like blending in, not being noticed. And that's really more of like what we would be going for if we're going for like not having people talk about you. It's just like having yourself be like, you can still do things, you can still be up to stuff. But it's just like having people not notice you up to stuff, having people not think of you when they're trying to like craft, I don't know, whatever rumor or whatever thing gets them excited about, whatever stories they have to tell people to keep them engaged. They just don't think of you. And so I guess that's that little tangent about like combust planets, how they could be potentially utilized, within the specific contexts, because everything, we have our general rules in elections that we try to avoid, and there are reasons for that, but every rule has an exception, and it all comes down to, like, what is the point of this talisman? What is this talisman trying to do? And what are the best symbols that we can get in an election to paint the picture of that intention, or of that talisman's goal? And that's going to be very, in a lot of cases, the rules are the same because we tend to want the same things, or we tend to be able to get the same things out of the same symbolism. We want things to grow. We want things to be good. We want things to be stable. We want things to last, that kind of thing. So this is why a lot of our rules are the same. Waxing moon apply to a good aspect with a benefic planet because we want something good to come out of it and maintain that. But like even combustion can be utilized for something. Even the moon square Mars and Saturn and conjoin the node can be used for something. It's just whether or not this is the thing that needs to be used for. And then our final election that we're going to talk about is the 15th Lunar Mansion talisman from Australia. And this one takes place on December 7th at 7:20 in the morning. It's a little different from the previous example of it in that now the moon is on the midheaven in the 15th mansion, but she's still applying that square to Mercury in Capricorn. And this is another one which I think is kind of interesting because I typically don't think I would go to the moon aspecting a planet in the 12th house. Like the moon aspecting planets in cadent houses, I don't super care. Like some people get really picky about. I don't necessarily care about them that often. But the 12th is when it's like, The 12th tends to have to do with like hidden things that are hidden. And I don't like it when the moon applies to planets in the 12th house because it can be difficult for somebody to recognize the effects of their talisman. And that's like the whole point for me, is that, the reason why we do this is because it's real and it's measurable and you can see it happen. But when you're making a talisman with like the moon in the 12th house, or, the moon aspecting things in the 12th house, or the 12th house somehow being very emphasized, you don't have that visibility to it. And so it can be hard to be like, yes, this is a talisman that actually did something that worked, and I'm confident that that happened. But going back to my thing about like, there are rules and there are rules for a reason, but there's an exception to every rule. I also kind of feel like the moon applying to a planet in the 12th house of secrecy, of hidden things, makes a lot of sense thematically for a talisman that's about suppressing rumors. That's about keeping, keeping rumors away. Because if Mercury represents news and speech and, rumors, news, having that in the 12th house secreted away, it's like, well, this doesn't reach you. This doesn't come to you. This is not a you problem. This is a somebody else problem. Which I think can be very powerful, a very powerful symbol in this context. We're going to have Saturn as the ruler of the first house here in Pisces. And this is probably the one thing that I'm kind of iffy about with this election, is that with Saturn here as the ruler of the first house, we do have kind of a wide square between Mars and Saturn here. It's about 7 degrees, which is about the breaking point in my orbs for Mars-Saturn connections. Let me think, 3 plus 4 is 7. So I usually give them about 7 degrees to make their connections. I would be more concerned if this was an applying square, but seeing that Mars is moving past Saturn, I also don't hate this symbol thematically, just because it's like, you were in danger, now you're not. So especially if you have been somebody who has been the target of like some sort of rumor or like aggressive speech or like argument or something like that, the Mars moving past the Saturn square, I think, can be really good for like, we're now moving away from that and we're not going to let that happen again. So if you are kind of in that situation, if this is something that you've gone through recently, this could be like a really great election to kind of capture that like more personal situation for you. But all right, that's all that we have going on for us for this 2-week period. Hopefully we start to get some more stuff as Jupiter stations direct in January. Things should start to pick up, hopefully. But one thing that I do want to remind you of is that when we go through these periods of time where we don't have a lot going on, make sure to check your heliacal rises for your fixed stars. Those can be really great for when there's not a lot going on, or just as like dates on the calendar to remember for talismanic creation or celebration, or however you want to incorporate those dates into your own practice. I have a page on my site which kind of guesstimates the heliacal rise dates for the various fixed stars from various latitudes on Earth. All you need to know is sort of like your nearest latitude to get a good sense of it. But what's really going to be like more specific, more helpful is like a specific astronomical program to calculate what the heliacal rise date is, because it can differ based on like elevation and latitude and things like that. So it can be very, like, make sure to get something a bit more specific. And I do have a video on how to use and set up that program to tell you the information that you need for heliacal rise talismans. But yeah, hopefully things start to pick up. I think coming up now, we've got the Antares heliacal rise, Vega heliacal rise, and Rasa Hog for those who are like interested in kind of exploring those stars and those themes. Those are coming up within the next month or so, definitely between now and the end of the year. So be sure to look into that, see if that's something you can work with. And I will see you all again on our Sagittarius New Moon, where we might change it up a little bit. But everybody take care, and I will see you then.